Okay, so thank you for being here. Okay, so we are going to look at how to recognize if persons have medical conditions that manifest in mental health sort of forms, yeah, and what we can do as PRH helping professionals. And as we see, we're going to be more aware of possible signs of mental and medical conditions that might present themselves in clients and others. And then we can know not just our limits as PRH professionals, but also what we can offer, yeah, which is the last part, how we can potentially provide support and how we can collaborate with medical professionals and other health professionals in terms of providing support for certain individuals. We look at how we are made of our brain, our hardware, which needs electricity. Yeah, it needs power. There's a power supply issue in our bodies and that place. And then how this produces our mind. And our mind can think things, and it's like the software, and also interact with people. Both it becomes an input as well as an output in our daily lives. Okay, so we're going to look at how in medicine we often say we have a biopsychosocial or spiritual. Not all have the spiritual, yeah. Some just say biopsychosocial model. We have this model, yeah, and that way we understand things. Is it a biological thing? Is it a psychological thing? Is it a social thing or spiritual thing? So I'll give you an example. I don't know whether you're aware of delirium. Yeah, delirium is when someone might behave in a way that's not normal, sort of usually acute, but not necessarily. It's an urgent medical condition because it means that there's something truly wrong with the whole body, actually. Yeah, that's an example of a biological dimension of a mental health condition where actually the problem is not a mental health direct problem, but a problem in the whole body, in the whole person, that because of toxins or here substances, infection, injury, developmental issues or genetic conditions or hormonal imbalance. So, there are lots of different possibilities, yeah, physical illnesses, yeah, and so on, that make our brains not able to function the way it should function. Yeah, that's one thing. Another example is dementia. Yeah, in dementia, it's about progressive. So the hardware is like it's getting old, right? But not just old, it's degenerating. Yeah, so it's losing its function. So it might possibly first they were able to think in a certain way, and then they might behave. Their behavior might change. Their way of their personality can even change. Yeah, because the hardware is degrading. Yeah, and that of course is an example of how the biology of us then presents itself, expresses itself in a sort of a mental health situation. Yeah, and a little bit more. So I suppose one thing I say is that the source of the root cause of the problem and the manifestation of the problem and the treatment for the problem can be three different dimensions. Yeah, this is quite interesting. Where, for example, it can be a biological issue that then manifests like a psychological issue. Yeah, or in a social issue, like fights between certain individuals, for example. But the fights can actually come from, for example, somebody with diabetes, who then, when their blood sugar goes down, they become irritable, for example. And then they have a fight every morning with their spouse. Yeah. So you don't think that it's a biological issue, but it can be. Yeah. And we don't really know so much about spiritual, so we're not really going to go there, but there are some different things. But another example can be the opposite. As we notice, some things are psychologically rooted, but then we feel it in our bodies, right? So, we've got our stomach ache, butterflies in our stomach, diarrhea, headaches, whatever. We actually feel it in our bodies, but the source is not our body. There's nothing wrong with our body, actually, but the body manifests these problems that can be psychological. That's also another possibility. Yeah. And sometimes what's interesting also is the treatment for these conditions can also be in a different place, you know? So for example, it might come from a psychological issue, manifesting in the biology of how our body functions, but the treatment can be a social treatment where when the person feels loved and cared for and understood, then suddenly the psychological issues are relieved and the biological problem goes away. That's an example. Yeah. So it's sort of this interaction between the four. The spiritual is a magical part that, it's still hard to understand. But there's also that, so I don't know, miracles, whatever, things like that. So I suppose it's good to understand that there's this framework, because we have our diagram of the person. As I see some of you have the diagram of the person, and that's really the way we understand PRH. But you know what? It's very similar to this. The body is the biology, right? Yeah. And then we have the social, which is the human relationships, yeah, the human environment, yeah. The psychological is include all of that, yeah. It includes the eye, it includes the sensibility, it includes the being in a way, yeah. And then the spiritual is that transcendent dimension that we also understand. So we actually have fairly similar ways of conceptualizing it. And so when we know this language, we can relate with people who speak this language, then it might facilitate our collaboration. Okay. If any questions arise, please just write it in the chat or stop me anytime. Yeah. Okay. So what is this? I will start with, I'm going to talk about lots of different conditions, yeah? But sort of like, not just talk about, oh, this is that, but also sort of bring it further into how does this play with our understanding and of PRH and how we use it for people. I'll give you an example of addiction, yeah. Now, there are lots of different addictions. There are physical addictions and there are behavioral addictions, and they can be both together. Yeah. But basically, in addiction, whether it comes from a substance or not, yeah, something happens in the brain. Something changes in the brain that makes people behave in a certain way. Yeah. The way the brain works is it's very much stimulus, and then we react to our stimulus. Yeah, it goes like that. The way the stimulus is then perceived by this brain becomes a little bit different. Yeah. So when there's an addiction, however it happened, some is because peers, some because, some people, I don't know, get treated with medication and then they become addicted to it. There are lots of different reasons why people become addicted. That there's some sort of trigger that happens when they see the trigger, this trigger, whatever it can be. A beer bottle is a trigger, for example, or a place can be a trigger. A person can be a trigger. A thought can be a trigger. Anything can be a trigger. But when the trigger comes, the brain goes, okay, my answer is whatever I'm addicted to. Yeah. And then it goes to that. And actually, it needs that, because if it doesn't get it, there's some sort of pain that happens. Yeah. Discomfort. And so they do it. Not because they choose to or they want to necessarily, even though they can. Yeah. But it's like the brain says, I must do this. Yeah, I must do this. So that becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes this addiction. And the thing is, it becomes a vicious cycle, because the more they do it, the more it becomes like a brain pattern. Yeah. It becomes really, really hard to get off. And we notice that this is happening not just for substances. And this is really sad for the generation that lives on computers, gadgets, internet, games, or other things that are designed to make you addicted. Oh my goodness. Some people are actually designers of how to get people addicted. So yeah, I suppose people who, make cigarettes are also designing the same thing. This is the world today. Yeah. And so what happens here in the second part is, okay, so we talked about the craving, but also what happens is a tolerance. What does it mean? What's enough today is not enough tomorrow. And it's not enough the day after. And it becomes you need more and more and more to feel the same comfort. And actually, you're always in discomfort in that case. Yeah. And when you try not to, there's a withdrawal. It's really painful. It's not nice. And because it's not nice, people have problematic behaviors with their social circumstances. And if they have to buy things like, drugs and so on, then they start, criminal behavior and all that, which becomes a pattern. Yeah. So if you see, this is also similar, but it kind of enriches the other picture a little bit more, where it can start anywhere. Yeah? It can start with problems in life, which then trigger stress, anxiety, anger, fear. You try to search for solutions. Now, when addictions become a temporary solution, usually some sort of distraction, some sort of feel good quick fix, yeah, then the reward system in the brain changes, because then, oh, I feel good. This makes me feel good. I should go there. Yeah. They have a temporary sense of relief from pain, but it's not going to ever be satisfying. They're going to have other problems, maybe worse, and it goes round and round. But we want to take them out of this pattern. Yeah. And they want to get out. And actually, nobody actually wants to be addicted. Yeah. And so if we can give them that support and, grow them out of here and say, you don't have to go here. There's other ways to make you feel good. It is possible. It's possible for people to get out of this. But what's also very interesting is one of our friends in PRH used to be an addict. Yeah. And he went to rehab for a long time and so on. Before he was an addict, he was sort of like, he would, oh, I don't know whether before or after, but he also took PRH, but he was still addicted. Yeah. He took PRH, he was still addicted, he went to rehab, and his body was clear from the addiction, because PRH cannot clear that from the body. Yeah. So he had to go through rehab to help his body get out of the pattern. But once that was out of him, the PRH kicked in because he was able to find a purpose. This is where it's different. And it's quite interesting because an addict told me like this: oh, I became an addict because I had no dreams for myself. I had no aspirations. And this can happen to all levels. Maybe some people whose life is so complicated or unpleasant, then they feel helpless and hopeless. Or it can also be someone with a very maybe privileged life that then feels sort of dissatisfied, with a lack of purpose also, right? And then they get stuck in addictions. But if they don't have this capacity to find their purpose that PRH and other things can provide, yeah, there are many means maybe, but then they relapse a lot. They relapse. But this person, for example, he was able to say, now I know, because now my body's functioning. I can discover my being, yeah, and really live it. And he became sort of a support worker for addicts, yeah. So he's working with the addiction centers and so on to help them say, you can discover yourself. He's not a PRH educator, but he just lives in that way that sort of awakens that, and he finds his purpose there. So that's quite interesting. Yeah. So we're looking at it in sort of the different angles. Okay. All right. So that's an example. But actually, in in medicine, in psychiatry and psychology, we have a very long list of all the wrong things that can happen to people. And in the workshop boundaries, we actually I took it with Leah actually. Janine gave it. Yeah, that's the PRH module. Yeah, it's from PRH, sort of looking at it in that angle. But look from PRH, looking at, okay, all of these conditions. Here we're kind of going the other way. Okay, here's all these conditions. Where does PRH fit into it? Yeah. I'm not going to go to all of them. That's not possible. You need a degree and more. And there are specializations for all of this. But just to understand the categories, yeah, to just give an overview, okay? We start with conditions that we call, the whole thing, one way of, categorizing what can be wrong to people is in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We call it the DSM. Yeah. And then different countries have also their different categories. And the WHO also have the International Classification of Disease. So at least you know that if you talk to someone and they say DSM or ICD-10 or ICD-11 or all that, that's their speak for the long list. Yeah. And for these the things on this list, there are criteria of what fits into this and what doesn't. And the medical profession is obsessed with putting people into categories. Yeah. And what we want to do is categories are supposed to be helpful and not be a trap. And some even patients or clients then look for a box. Which box do I fit in? And they're stuck with trying to find the box and so on, and whether the box is big enough or small enough for them. At the end of the day, it's about being human, right? Being people. So sometimes it's about reminding people that they're people, yeah. And yes, these diagnostics can help them. How does it help? When you know that you have a certain condition, it gives you a kind of relief that it's not your fault, because you have this condition. So, and it gives you a kind of hope that, oh, somebody understands it. Yeah. It's not just me, and it's being researched, and maybe there's treatment and so on. So it can be very helpful for people to know their diagnosis, but people are not diagnosed, and sometimes that's forgotten, unfortunately. Okay, so the first part, the first group would be neurodevelopmental disorders. What does that mean? Neuro are nerves, developmental, that means it came from when we were already growing or before that. Meaning it's our hardware the way we're hardwired. Okay, that's basically what it means. So, for example, intellectual disabilities, even though it is possible for people to have, say, an accident and then lose their intellectual capacities, yeah, generally speaking, there are also intellectual disabilities where it's a limitation of the hardware. Some people get Pentium and some people get below Pentium, unfortunately, yeah. And so, of course, their capacities are different, yeah. And some have communication disorders. Autism is also an example of a neurodevelopmental disorder. It usually presents when they're a child. Unfortunately, it happens when they're at about 1.5 to 2.5 years, when something often changes in the brain. We're still learning about this. What is actually happening? How come people become autistic? Yeah, because they're not born autistic. So it's a bit sad. Something is happening during the time that they develop. And it is like their nerves. See, the way we develop is like when we're babies, we have so many nerves. There's nerve endings galore. And then it starts to prune out. It might be a sad thing, but it's a good thing. Why? Because then we use the part of our brain that is most relevant. And then we use it well. And then we train it. And somehow during that process of that pruning, something goes awry. Yeah. And people with autistic conditions, their sensitivities is very different, for example. Their focus is very different and so on. So there's something that happens there, and we're still researching about it. Yeah. Another thing is attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. Generally speaking, it is found from childhood. Yeah. Even though some people don't even realize it until later, that's also possible. And some people like the box even though they don't belong there. And sometimes everybody's just given the diagnosis blanket. Yeah, you run around, I'm going to give you ADHD diagnosis or whatever. So it's a little bit problematic. But there is some truth to the fact that at any given time, there's a million stimulus that comes into our senses, all of our senses. Can be our sight, our hearing. Right now, you can look at a million different things. You can look at your screen, you can look at your hands, you can look at a million things. So our brain has to select which one am I going to look at or do or focus on. That's a higher level processing, And there's a problem in some people to do this higher level processing. Yeah. And when that happens, what happens is they can't select. They get distracted very quickly. They forget things. Or they have to hyper-focus. That's the only way, which is to actually forget about everything else, and it's just that, for example. Then they have that extreme because they can't do anything else in between. Yeah. And we'll look at that a little bit more later. Another condition is motor disorders. Things can appear later on in life, but they're generally under the category of neurodevelopmental. They make movements, they might say things, they might, that they can't control. And it can be really painful for them because some people swear out of nowhere, just keep swearing, or they might hit themselves, or do all sorts of things that they don't want to do, but they can't help it. Their hardware, there's something wrong with it. Yeah. So there are treatments for that. And also we need to give them a lot of support, of course. So that's an example, and there are many others. Okay, the next thing is the schizophrenia spectrum, yeah, and other psychotic disorders. What are these? It's the lack of capacity in certain extent, because it's not necessarily full, to register reality as it is. So somehow in the process of understanding what we're experiencing, our brain says, okay, this is reality and this is not, right? Like, for example, we have dreams. I think all of you have dreamt something. And you kind of know that they're dreams. And when you're dreaming, you don't know whether it's real or not. But afterwards, you say, oh, that was a dream. Imagine being like in a dream all the time. You don't know what is real and what is not. Or during certain episodes. Yeah. You hear things, but there is nobody talking, for example. It's a scary, unfortunate, unpleasant condition. Yeah. And it's really sad. But there are treatments for it. So there is hope for people like this. And people with schizophrenia don't have to necessarily suffer. There is a recovery. We call it recovery. We never say cure, because we call it a treatable condition rather than sort of curable condition. It's like wearing glasses, right? If you kind of lose your capacity to see very well, I'm wearing glasses too sometimes, to read and so on, then you need your glasses. There are some, I don't know, laser surgeries and so on to fix things, but generally speaking, you need some sort of help to be able to see clearly. And the same for them. To see clearly what is reality and not, they might need help. And it's a very biological condition, very hardware related, because it is very genetic, very strong genetic component. So if someone in their family has schizophrenia, the likelihood of another family member having schizophrenia is very large. And it's sad, because then you have a whole family with schizophrenia. It's really sad. Okay. The next thing is the mood disorders. And there are different types of mood disorders. One is the bipolar disorder, where they can feel very, very intensely up and very, very intensely down, or mildly up and very, very down. It's also possible, yeah. So basically, there's this up and down process in their moods, their swings. We all have swings, but they're extreme and they're episodic. So there's like a time when they go up, a time when they go down, and sometimes a time where they are totally normal and totally fine. Yeah. And we'll look at this a little bit, because interestingly, the main treatment for these conditions is also similar. There's a lot of treatment that's very similar to treatment for epilepsy. And epilepsy is a condition in the brain where the electricity goes haywire. Yeah. So there's an electricity going haywire in the brain in the areas of mood. Yeah. So where then they can't control it. Yeah. And so we need to help them in different ways. Then there's the depressive disorder. Isn't it interesting that there's bipolar and there's depressive, they're kind of separated? That's interesting. Because some people never go really up. They just get depressed. And in this case, the treatment is different, because we treat them with antidepressants, for example, in psychiatry. It's quite dangerous, actually, to give antidepressants to bipolar people without mood stabilizers, because then they can be manic. lift them up and they shoot up. So we treat them a little bit differently. Yeah. And these depressions, there are lots of different types of diagnosis, sort of names for it. Yeah, names for it and different criteria for it. Some can be long, some can be short, episodic, and some can be related to situations in life, and some are not. Some are related to physical things. Anybody who has had premenstrual, syndrome, for example, knows that it can become depressed or cranky or whatever during those moments. And some it's very, very severe, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, for example, or there can be also medical condition that make people depressed and so on. Yeah. Okay. Next, there are anxiety disorders. Yeah. It's interesting because we'll see that depression and anxiety, they kind of overlap sometimes. People who are depressed can feel anxious also, and they kind of go together often. And they're treated almost similarly also. So I see it as a continuum in some cases, not always. So sort of like people get anxious and then depressed, or depressed and then they get anxious, and so sort of there's a continuum, sort of. Yeah. And this includes specific anxieties. So they're only anxious about certain things. Yeah. Like a lot of social circumstances, for example, social anxiety disorder, social phobia, for example. Yeah. The phobias, million different phobias of this and that and whatever. It can be related to experiences. Yeah, it's possible. We categorize this here. And this is the generalized anxiety disorder. It's like they're just generally anxious. It's just there's sort of like what about this? What about that? It's not specific. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. Yeah. There's the panic disorder where the anxiety shoots up, and then it feels like you're gonna die, overwhelmed, don't know what to do, kind of thing. But it's usually shorter, and then it kind of gets relieved. Yeah. There's things like separation anxiety disorder, which is common in children when they don't want their parents to leave and so on. That's also, we categorize that here. Basically, anxiety disorders. Related but a little bit different is the obsessive compulsive disorders. Things like, oh, I need a nose job. I need a plastic surgery for my nose, and then they have another one because their nose is never good enough. That's an example. Yeah. And then hair pulling, there's washing, the constant washing, and so on, and that's in a separate category. Interestingly, just to know, it's treated with very high doses of antidepressants. Isn't that interesting? So there's something in the brain that way. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but just to let you know that the different things. Then there's the trauma and stressor related disorders. Isn't that interesting that they separate this? Depression can also be trauma related. Anxiety can also be trauma related, but there's a specific one that is just specific related to trauma. Yeah. And that includes acute stress disorder, for example. That's like suddenly they lost someone or they see something and they're acutely stressed and they're behaving in ways that not normal for them because they're overwhelmed. Yeah. Can be several days, several, time. It can be something in the past already. Yes. Post-traumatic stress disorder and a lot of that. Yeah. And can be very physical. They can have flashbacks, all sorts of things like that. Or adjustment disorders. Adjustment disorder is like, you lose your job and then you kind of go jobless and then you don't know how to adjust to it, that kind of thing. We put that in that category. Okay. Okay, so there's so many, and I'm not going to go into them. I'm just going to tell them that there's a lot. Tell you that there's a lot. And if you have any question ever, that you suddenly find someone with something like, I don't know, sleep wake, they can't sleep at night and they wake up, the circadian rhythm them is all weird, or maybe they have paraphiliac, paraphilic, they like certain things a little bit more than others, or personality disorders. Just now we talked also a little bit, about borderline personality disorder. That's a common and increasing condition. So we'll look at it a little bit. So neurocognitive disorders, that's sort of like because of the brain hardware kind of thing. So lots of different things. Yeah, gender dysphoria, dissociative disorders, many different things. Okay, so before we continue, I'll stop first and take a breath because I've spoken a lot. And I want to hear just, I don't know, one or two words from each of you of what's alive in you after hearing all this. Go ahead, who wants to speak? Should I stop recording? I can stop recording first. Yeah, I'll stop recording.